Can demons truly take control of a person, pushing them to commit horrifying acts? From a man who claimed he was the devil to another who believed he was saving his wife through a fatal exorcism, these are the chilling cases of individuals who swore they were possessed by demons. Sean Richard Sellers was born in 1969. His mother, Vonda, was just 16 years old at the time when he was born. His father was an unstable drinker who left the family when Sean was around 3 or 4 years old. Sean Sellers' life took a dark turn during his teenage years when he became deeply involved in Satanism and the occult. By the time he was 15 and 16, he was performing rituals every day. He kept small containers of his own blood in the refrigerator, sometimes drinking it at school. His practices included harming himself and calling upon dark spiritual forces. Sellers believed he had formed a bond with a spirit he called exorcism, which he described as a presence full of anger and hatred. He claimed this spirit spoke to him, pushing him toward harmful actions and giving him a sense of control over his troubled life. During his sophomore year at Putnam City North High School, his fascination with these practices became more obvious. He carried a book about Satanism to class and talked about spirits moving through the school hallways. His classmates noticed how unpredictable his mood could be, shifting from excitement to deep sadness. Sellers became obsessed with the idea of good versus evil, convinced that unseen forces were influencing him. He took part in rituals that involved harming himself and drinking his own blood, believing it strengthened his connection to dark forces. Sometimes he performed these rituals alone, while other times he shared them with friends who were also interested in the occult. Even though he displayed extreme mood swings and fixations, he was never officially diagnosed with a mental illness that could explain his belief in being controlled by a spirit. His conviction that he was possessed was tied to his deep involvement in satanic practices rather than any recognized medical condition. Sellers' belief in this spiritual influence led to a series of devastating events. On September 7, 1985, he caused the passing of Robert Paul Bauer, a convenience store worker, after an argument over a beer sale. He later described feeling an overwhelming surge of energy during the moment, which he believed was Ezrate's presence taking over. Months later, on March 5, 1986, Sellers took the lives of his mother and stepfather while they were sleeping. He later claimed he had no memory of what happened, saying he was under demonic control at the time. During his trial, his defense focused on his claims of spiritual possession and his devotion to Satanism. However, the jury rejected this argument and he was found responsible. He received the harshest penalty allowed by law in 1986. While in prison, Sellers experienced a complete change in beliefs. He converted to Christianity and renounced his past, later writing a book called Web of Darkness, where he detailed his journey into and out of Satanism in hopes of discouraging others from following the same path. On February 4, 1999, Sellers' sentence was carried out at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. The next case involves a man whose final meal request wasn't just food, it was a ritual shrouded in mystery. James Edward Smith was born in 1952 in Jefferson County, Kentucky. He attended the University of Kentucky, studying psychology, but did not complete his degree. Before his legal troubles, he worked as a tarot card reader and was deeply involved in mystical practices. Smith had only a minor legal history before the event that led to his sentence. On March 7, 1983, in Houston, Texas, he entered the offices of the Union National Life Insurance Company. There, he confronted a 44-year-old employee named Larry Rojas, forced him to hand over cash, and then caused him fatal harm. Smith quickly fled the scene but was taken into custody soon after. During his trial, Smith's defense was based on his mental state and his claim that he had been under the influence of an evil spirit named Hadad. He believed that this supernatural force had taken control of him, leading him to commit these acts. He described Haddad as a powerful entity that influenced his thoughts and actions, causing blackouts and sudden urges he couldn't control. Smith recounted episodes where he would lose awareness, only to later find signs that he had done things he could not recall. He spoke of hearing voices and seeing a shadowy figure, which he believed was Haddad. These experiences grew more intense in the days leading up to the event, until he felt as though he had completely lost control. How did the court respond to his claims of possession? The court ordered psychological evaluations to determine his mental health. While some experts acknowledged that Smith genuinely believed he was under the influence of an outside force, they concluded that he was mentally capable of understanding his actions and the consequences. The jury found him responsible, and in 1984, he was given the maximum sentence allowed under the law. As his final day approached, Smith continued to display his deep belief in mysticism. For his last meal, he made an unusual request. But before we get to that, make sure to like and subscribe for more chilling stories like this one. So, what did he ask for? A lump of dirt, intended for a ritual. Prison officials denied the request and gave him yogurt instead. On June 26, 1990, his sentence was carried out. But the next case? It's disturbing on a whole different level, almost beyond comprehension. Andre Lee Thomas was born in 1983 in Muskogee County, Oklahoma. He was raised primarily by his mother in Sherman, Texas, as one of 6 brothers. His family faced extreme financial struggles, often living without running water, heat, or electricity. Despite these hardships, Andre was an intelligent child. He was active in church and even joined his school's gifted and talented program. However, around the age of 10, he began hearing voices, describing them as angels and demons arguing in his head. This was the beginning of a serious decline in his mental health. As he grew older, his struggles worsened. By his teenage years, he had attempted to take his own life multiple times and had several run-ins with the law. At 18, Andre married Laura Boren, and they had a son together. Their marriage didn't last, and they eventually separated. In the weeks leading up to March 27, 2004, Andre's mental state deteriorated rapidly. He spoke about hearing voices and believed he was receiving divine messages. On that day, he forcibly entered Laura's apartment. In a deeply disturbing act, he harmed Laura, their 4-year-old son, and Laura's 1-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. Driven by delusions, he attempted to remove their hearts, believing he was freeing them from dark forces. Afterward, he turned the sharp object on himself, expecting not to survive, but when he did, he took the organs with him, disposed of them, and later walked into a police station, claiming that he had been following divine orders. Andre's belief that he was acting under spiritual guidance became the foundation of his legal defense. He was convinced that dark forces had taken over his family and that he was carrying out a mission to rid them of these entities. His hallucinations were not sudden. He had been experiencing them for years. He described seeing small shadowy figures coming out of the prison walls and hearing music playing in his head. His accounts raise important questions. Could Andre tell the difference between reality and his visions? His statements suggest his mind blurred the line between the two. Did the legal system provide him with proper mental health care? His long history of psychosis suggests there may have been gaps in addressing his condition. While awaiting trial, Andre's mental state continued to decline. He harmed himself by removing one of his own eyes. Later, he repeated the act with his remaining eye and consumed it, believing this would prevent the government from controlling his thoughts. Despite his diagnosis of schizophrenia and clear signs of severe mental illness, the court ruled that he was competent to stand trial. In 2005, he was convicted and given the most severe sentence. Now, imagine what happens when severe mental illness is combined with claims of supernatural influence. Thomas Harrison Provenzano was born in 1949 in the United States. He had struggled with severe mental health issues for years, including paranoid schizophrenia. On January 10, 1984, Provenzano entered the Orange County Courthouse in Orlando, Florida, carrying a hidden shotgun. He used it against courthouse officers, leading to the passing of 60-year-old bailiff William Arnie Wilkerson. Two others were severely injured: 53-year-old bailiff Harry Dalton, who suffered brain injuries and partial paralysis before passing away 7 years later, and 19-year-old correctional officer Mark Parker, who was paralyzed from the neck down and later passed away in March 2009 due to complications from his injuries. During his trial, Provenzano's mental health became a major focus. He experienced extreme delusions, at one point claiming he was Jesus Christ. He also believed his prison cell was under the control of dark forces, making him act in ways that seemed paranoid and unpredictable. These behaviors raised serious concerns about whether he was mentally fit to stand trial or fully aware of his actions at the time of the incident. While in custody, Provenzano described deeply unsettling experiences. He felt an overwhelming, invisible presence and often heard whispers, which he believed were coming from dark spirits. These experiences intensified his paranoia and strengthened his belief that supernatural forces were influencing his life. His fear of these forces led him to engage in unusual rituals, hoping to remove what he saw as negative energy. He would frequently whisper prayers, make specific hand movements he believed had spiritual significance, and display heightened distress. These behaviors made it difficult for prison staff to assess and manage his condition. Despite clear signs of his mental illness, the court ruled that Provenzano was mentally competent to stand trial. He was found responsible for causing the passing of one person and severely injuring two others. The jury recommended the most severe penalty, which the judge confirmed. In addition to this, he was given 2 30-year sentences for the harm caused to the other officers. While awaiting his sentence, Provenzano's mental health continued to decline. He remained convinced of his divine identity and believed supernatural forces were influencing his surroundings. His legal team argued that carrying out his sentence would violate legal protections against cruel and unusual punishment, given his severe mental state. However, these appeals were unsuccessful. On June 21, 2000, at the age of 51, Thomas Harrison Provenzano's sentence was carried out in Stark, Bradford County, Florida. As he faced his final moments, he held a crucifix with an image of Christ, reflecting the beliefs that had shaped much of his life. Provenzano's case raises complex questions about how the justice system handles individuals with severe mental health conditions, sparking debates about fairness, responsibility, and ethical considerations in such cases. His final meal consisted of half a grilled cheese sandwich, half a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, baked beans, hot canned apples, 2 slices of bread, and tea. His last words were directed to his attorney, Michael Ryder, saying,
"Thanks for everything, Mike."
Charles Laverne Singleton was born in 1959. On June 1, 1979, in Hamburg, Arkansas, he went into a small grocery store run by 19-year-old Mary Lou York. While inside, he targeted her and caused 2 serious injuries to her neck. Before she passed away, Mary Lou was able to tell others that Singleton was the one who hurt her. He was arrested shortly after. In October 1979, Singleton was found guilty and given capital punishment. He also received a life sentence for what happened at the store. By the late 1980s, while being held in a high-security facility, Singleton's mental health took a drastic turn. He started having extreme delusions, believing that his prison cell was filled with harmful entities and that authorities had placed a device inside his ear. He also believed that every time he read the Bible, someone was stealing his thoughts. His belief in these dark forces was so intense that he described his cell as being overrun by them. He claimed to hear voices and see shadowy figures lurking in the corners. These experiences convinced him that the prison staff was working with these unseen forces to manipulate and harm him. At times, he would shout and act aggressively toward things no one else could see, alarming both prison staff and other inmates. Because of these struggles, Singleton's behavior became unpredictable and sometimes aggressive. He would often talk to himself, yell at things that weren't there, and accuse the prison staff of being involved in a plot against him. This behavior led to him being more isolated and required medical attention. Eventually, Singleton was diagnosed with schizophrenia and given medication to manage his condition. At first, he took the medication willingly, but at other times, it was given to him against his wishes to control his symptoms. This raised legal and ethical questions about whether it was right to give medication to someone in his position just so he could be considered fit for legal consequences. In 2003, a court ruled that it was legally acceptable to medicate him to make sure he understood his situation. On January 6, 2004, the legal sentence was carried out in Arkansas. For his final meal, Singleton chose 2 double soy patty sandwiches, fried eggplant, fried green tomatoes, and fried sweet potato slices, which he ate while visiting with his spiritual advisor. Charles Laverne. Singleton's final words were delivered through a written statement he left with prison officials. Before his sentence was carried out, he indicated,
I was going to speak, but I wrote it down.
What are your thoughts on this case? Tell us in the comments below. Blaine Keith Milam was born in 1989. By 2008, at just 19 years old, Milam was engaged to Jessica Carson, and they lived together with Carson's 13-month-old daughter, Amora Bain Carson. Their relationship was troubled, and they gradually became consumed by unsettling beliefs. The couple's fears about demonic possession did not appear suddenly, but developed over time. Jessica Carson later testified that they had used a Ouija board, which led her to believe that her mother had harmed her father. This belief caused tension within her family and fed into growing paranoia. Over time, Milam and Carson started believing that supernatural forces were affecting their daily lives. They convinced themselves that Amora was under the influence of a spirit named Martha. There was no real evidence of this, but they misinterpreted normal infant behavior, crying and restlessness, as signs of something unnatural. They discussed different ways to free her from this presence, including seeking help from a priest. However, their paranoia made them believe that traditional methods wouldn't work. On December 2, 2008, the couple decided to handle the situation themselves. Milam took charge, telling Carson to stay out of the room, claiming her presence would interfere. Carson later testified that she heard loud noises and what she described as the spirit crying out. Milam told her that he had to restrain Amora to calm the spirit. The extreme actions that followed resulted in Amora losing her life. Afterward, Milam and Carson left their home, supposedly to find a priest to complete the process. They sold personal belongings to gather money for this purpose. When they returned, they placed Amora's body in a hole in the bathroom floor. When authorities arrived, the couple initially gave conflicting explanations, including claims of an accident and even an incident involving an animal. Eventually, Carson admitted that Milam was responsible for what had happened during their attempt to remove the spirit. Milam was taken into custody and faced serious charges. During the trial, the defense pointed to his deep belief in supernatural forces, arguing that it influenced his decisions. However, the prosecution focused on the severity of what had happened. In 2010, Milam was found responsible and given the most severe legal penalty. His sentence has been stayed multiple times due to legal appeals, including challenges related to bite mark evidence and claims of intellectual disability. But what happens when someone genuinely believes they're a prophet? This brings us to Ron. Ronald Watson Lafferty was born in 1941 into a deeply religious Mormon family in Utah. He grew up following the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS, and his early years reflected the faith-centered lifestyle of many in his community. However, as he got older, he began embracing more extreme beliefs, particularly those supporting polygamy and personal prophetic revelations. This shift led to his removal from the LDS Church in 1983. In the early 1980s, Ron and his younger brother Dan became involved with a fundamentalist group called the School of Prophets. Ron believed he was a prophet who received direct messages from God. One of these so-called revelations, as he claimed, instructed him to remove specific individuals, including his sister-in-law, Brenda Wright Lafferty, and her 15-month-old daughter, Erica. He saw Brenda as someone who stood in the way of his beliefs, particularly his support for polygamy, and thought she was influencing his wife against him. On July 24, 1984, acting on what he believed to be divine instructions, Ron and Dan went to Brenda's home in American Fork, Utah. There, they ended her life and that of her young daughter. They fled the state but were caught weeks later in Reno, Nevada. During questioning and the trials that followed, Ron repeatedly insisted that he was following a higher calling and showed no regret for his actions. But was this conviction based on true faith, or was it a sign of deeper psychological struggles? Experts who examined him found that Ron genuinely believed his incarceration was the result of conspiracies involving the government, the LDS Church, and even supernatural forces. He claimed that the spirit of the trial judge's late father was influencing the case and said he was haunted by unseen entities. Despite these statements, Ron never considered himself mentally unwell. One expert even suggested that if he was hiding anything, it was the fact that he wasn't thinking rationally. Ron Lafferty's trial began in 1985, and he was found responsible for what had happened, receiving the most severe legal punishment. However, in 1991, a federal appeals court overturned the conviction, ruling that the process used to assess his mental fitness had not been handled correctly. After receiving psychiatric treatment, he was retried in 1996 and once again found guilty. He chose to face his sentence by firing squad, a rare option within the legal system. Despite multiple appeals, his conviction remained unchanged. While waiting for his sentence to be carried out, Ron's mental health continued to decline. He remained firm in his belief that supernatural forces were controlling his fate. However, in November 2019, before his sentence could be fulfilled, Ron Lafferty passed away from natural causes while still in prison. This case raises difficult questions about the connection between extreme religious beliefs and mental health. When someone does such things, believing they are following a divine command, where should society draw the line between faith and psychological instability? We would love to hear your perspective on this. Nikko Jenkins was born in 1986 in Colorado to David A. Magee and Lori Jenkins. His early years were filled with instability and hardship. By the age of 7, he had already brought a loaded handgun to school, showing serious behavioral struggles from an early age. At 15, he was involved in a car theft, leading to a 10.5-year sentence. During his time behind bars, he frequently clashed with both inmates and staff. After his release on July 30, 2013, he stepped back into society with a mind that seemed deeply unsettled. Within a month, Omaha witnessed a series of horrifying incidents. Between August 11th and 21st, 2013, 4 people lost their lives. Jenkins deceived his victims by making false promises, only to harm them in cold blood. He carried out these acts using a 12-gauge shotgun and a high-point carbine. The city grew anxious as the number of victims increased, with each scene more shocking than the last. Jenkins was taken into custody on August 29, 2013, for unrelated threats, But during an intense 8-hour questioning, he admitted to everything. His behavior was unsettling, shifting between calm explanations and unpredictable outbursts. He claimed that what he had done was part of a ritual for Apophis, an ancient Egyptian serpent figure, insisting that he was simply following orders from a higher power. Those in the courtroom were left in disbelief as he described his supposed connection with this entity. His claims of being controlled by a dark force were not fleeting remarks, but deeply ingrained beliefs. He spoke of eerie nighttime experiences where he would dream of Apophis whispering commands to him, and upon waking he felt compelled to act on them. To Jenkins, these were not just dreams but sacred encounters. He recalled waking up drenched in sweat, with the whispers still ringing in his ears. One of his most unsettling descriptions involved him staring into a mirror and seeing his reflection change. He believed his eyes glowed unnaturally, and his tongue flickered like a snake's, which he saw as proof that Apophis had taken hold of him. Was this truly an outside force controlling him, or was it a mind unraveling? Psychological evaluations suggested antisocial personality disorder, but Jenkins never wavered in his belief that he was under something else's influence. In May 2017, after a trial that blurred the line between reality and delusion, Jenkins was sentenced to the most severe punishment available for taking the lives of 4 individuals. The judge, acknowledging the aggressive nature of his actions and his apparent lack of remorse, ruled that the strongest legal penalty was necessary. In addition to this, he received another 450 years for other related offenses, ensuring he would remain behind bars indefinitely. As of 2024, Nikko Jenkins remains in confinement at the Tecumseh State Correctional Institution. Now, stay tuned, because what you are going to hear next will haunt you for years. Joseph Edward Duncan III was responsible for a series of disturbing acts over several decades across multiple states. Beyond what he did, his own writings and statements suggest that he believed he was being influenced or controlled by dark forces. Born on February 25, 1963, Duncan had a troubled childhood filled with instability and repeated encounters with law enforcement. By the age of 16, he had harmed younger boys and continued engaging in such actions that led to multiple arrests and time behind bars. Over the years, his actions became more severe, and he was eventually found responsible for multiple acts that devastated families. One of the most widely known incidents occurred in 2005 when he forced his way into the Groene family home in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Inside, he ended the lives of Brenda Groene, her fiancé Mark McKenzie, and her 13-year-old son, Slade. Afterward, he took the family's 2 youngest children, Shasta and Dylan, and subjected them to prolonged suffering. Tragically, Dylan did not survive, while Shasta was eventually found and rescued, making her the only survivor. Duncan frequently spoke about battling what he called demons. He shared these thoughts in his personal blog, The Fifth Nail. On April 24, 2005, he wrote,
God has shown me the right choice, but my demons have me tied to a spit, and the fire has already been lit.
As the days passed, his writings became even more unsettling. On May 11th, just days before he invaded the Groene home, he posted,
The demons have taken over.
These writings showed his increasing sense of fear, isolation, and confusion, suggesting that he believed he was losing control. Duncan's references to dark forces were not limited to his blog. During his trial, a deeply disturbing 33-minute video was presented as evidence. In the footage, Duncan can be seen harming Dylan Groene. At one moment, he chillingly states,
The devil is here, boy. The devil himself. The devil likes to watch children suffer and cry.
This statement raises questions about whether Duncan truly believed he was embodying something evil, or if he was using such imagery to instill overwhelming fear in his victims. Did Duncan actually believe he was under the control of something beyond himself, or was he using this as a way to shift blame? Some might argue that his writings and statements were attempts to avoid full responsibility, but the consistency of his claims suggests that he was battling something internally. Were these demons a way of representing his own uncontrollable thoughts and guilt? It is possible that Duncan personified his darkest desires and guilt as external forces, trying to separate himself from what he had done. In 2007, Duncan admitted to his actions and accepted responsibility for multiple charges. The following year, he received the highest legal penalty. While awaiting the final outcome of his case, Duncan was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. He declined treatment and passed away on March 28, 2021. Thomas Eugene Creech was born in 1950 in Hamilton, Ohio. Not much is known about his early years, but by the time he was a teenager, he had already started down a dangerous path. He later claimed that his first harmful act happened at age 17, when he caused the passing of a friend by drowning him in New Miami, Ohio. Over the years, Creech admitted to taking the lives of 42 people across nearly a dozen states, though investigators could only confirm his connection to 9 of them. In 1974, Creech admitted to his role in Dean's passing and was found responsible for Robinson's as well. His actions eventually led to his capture in Idaho, where he was linked to the loss of Edward Arnold and John Bradford. During his 1975 trial, Creech made headlines by claiming he was involved in dark rituals and secret ceremonies. He described elaborate gatherings where individuals were harmed in honor of mysterious forces, complete with chants and symbols. However, authorities were skeptical of his claims. His description sounded strikingly similar to stories from books and movies, leading many to believe he was exaggerating or fabricating these events. Why would someone create such dramatic stories? Some believe Creech wanted to make himself seem more intimidating or infamous. Others think he was trying to build a defense by suggesting that outside influences controlled his actions. Regardless of his motivations, the court focused on the solid evidence against him. In March 1976, Creech was sentenced to the most severe punishment allowed by law for the losses of Arnold and Bradford. His sentence was originally scheduled to be carried out on May 21, 1976, but legal appeals put it on hold. Over the years, Creech continued to admit to other similar acts, though many of these claims were later proven false. As of 2024, he remains one of the longest-serving individuals on death row in Idaho.